Recording in progress.
Oops. Hang on.
Hey, Adam.
Yeah.
I don't know where my microphone is. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
Yep.
Where the fuck is my...
we can hear you.
Okay, that's just some magical shit then. Anyway, good. I managed to even get a coffee before this stressful meeting.
Which airport are you at?
Bergen. Oh, Raphael, did you say Emily sent the screenshots or?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, cool.
I'll get the quotes. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, so, oh, hang on, I got an email from university. Okay, fantastic.
Seems Adam is in a different room today.
Mm.
You're in a different room.
Or a different background, anyway.
Different
yeah.
different angle.
Oh,
Still in the man cave, but the man cave is seriously endangered right now. Yeah, you know how it can be. It's getting smaller by the day.
Oh, really?
People are trespassing.
Yep, exactly, and other people want to have this as a studio.
I wonder who that other people can be, but yeah. So we obviously have looked at your email, Adam. Do you want to talk more, present more around that point? I would be very interested.
Yes, the idea was to somewhat integrate everything we have done so far, and to try to make one a bit more coherent view of everything. So the timeline, the ACM timeline is, that was a very horizontal and a very special interface in a way. And maybe not as, it's interesting to show some points like the connections and the citations, and perhaps also as a guide for a first overview of a field. But later on you want some sort of power user interface, I think, where you can actually do things. Because right now it's very limited, you can't do very many things. And as text is usually scrolled a bit more vertically, I've been playing around with the idea of changing the timeline to a vertical timeline instead, to let it go up and down, because if we do that, we could put the actual, both metadata and the document, the PDF document, and side by side in an endless horizontal scroll as well. And to me, that is very interesting, because that solves many of the interaction problems. Because then you could continue follow the trail of documents while seeing where you come from. And I think that is really exciting. And in a way, that has been in old Twitter clients. They use that kind of navigation as well, where you followed. I don't know if it was TweetDeck, but this idea has come up in many different interfaces, and also in the different Finder alternatives for Mac as well, where you click on a folder, you go deeper to the right, and still deeper, and you see where the previous folders. And I think for hypertext, it's really excellent to actually see where you came from, and especially with text where you don't really use the width so much, then you can use that for the kind of the navigation trail, to skip the back button and instead show where you come from, left to right.
I really like that breadcrumb kind of approach, where you always have, contextual awareness of your environment, and you know where you came from and where you can go, and the possibilities of the interface.
Yeah.
So I like that. I already knew the Andy Matuchak's working notes website, and then when you sent the email, I was like, oh, I've seen this before.
Yes, and really, to me, I've been thinking about it before, but when I saw it, yeah, but this can actually work. He had some special, his interface is slightly different than what I've had in mind, because it kind of collapses articles when it goes, it collapses it to the title and make it and transforms it in a way. But we don't have to do that. Just scroll it out of sight and maybe add a small, the breadcrumb navigation thing that is popular in some software, and that it can supplement the navigation part as well. So you can quickly jump forward and backwards in time. So what I done today, and I'm not really sure if I can send it or show it today, but I've made a vertical timeline, and instead of using text for the timeline, I can see if I can email you this at least, because they are on a different computer.
We do, of course, have a vertical timeline, you know. It's tab, and that is a vertical timeline. So I agree with going in that direction, but in a very different manner. Absolutely.
Yeah, but I will send you a screenshot at least of what I've been doing. So hold on, you can continue and comment on it while I'm sending it, and maybe you can show it on the here then. So what's your thoughts on the kind of horizontal navigation?
I'm a big fan. My platform uses horizontal navigation for everything, but it's based on cards. And for text, I like it because it kind of reminds me of, if I take a couple of pieces of paper, of stacking papers as well, because you can always leave the border like a little bit to the side like this, so that you can, kind of pull things out or spread them out as well like that. So I think there's a lot of exploration, and we can use, the analog papers or analog things to come up with different animations and concepts. We're not burdened by a physical space in a digital environment. So I think that's really nice. One recommendation that I have is that it has a lot to do with that is Reinventing Comics by Scott McCloud. And he talks a lot about the navigation of content in virtual space. I really like it.
Could you hold that up again for a second?
Reinventing Comics. Scott
Very
McCloud.
good. Thank you.
Yeah, that one is in a way just as interesting as Understanding Comics, even though Understanding Comics is more general. But Making Comics and Reinventing Comics presents many, more experimental ideas that I really like. So well worth the read.
It reminded me of that.
Oh, I got an idea for visual meta on the web. It was just sort of an epiphany. How about if we had a little widget that could appear on the web page, and clicking it would do a card flip, so that the back of, like imagine you're looking at an article and the article is represented as a panel floating somewhere in your overall website layout. If you could click on the little visual meta icon, that would cause that panel to do a card flip to the backside, and the backside would be all the visual meta.
Peter, you're talking about my product. That's exactly what we're going to have. But visual meta is going to be it's going to be one of the things, which is going to be great because you can get all the information from the content.
We did actually, I think we're all on the same wavelength there, because in Author, you could flip around to do the map view before, which we changed because it doesn't work well on the Mac, but also Liquid, if you click on the preferences thing, the whole thing flips. So the idea of using the back for different purposes is really, I think we all agree, is cool.
Agreed.
Or if we wanted more than one thing, we could imagine the pages are cubes and rotate them to different faces and have a whole slew to work with.
So I just emailed you kind of a mock-up of, or the first, the vertical version. Just so I remove. Let's see if someone can get it up on the screen, because I can't really, because they are on different computers right now. Did you get the email?
I did, and I'm looking, but because I'm on a low
Yes.
bandwidth airport free thing, I don't
Okay.
think I should share. Can someone else share? Yeah, I don't think this is a vertical timeline. I think this is using both in the good way. So I think this is a really, really nice approach. I think.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's kind of, the documents are not really in a left to right. It's not a special order really. It's just a compact representation of everything. So let's see. But the idea here is that here you can see 1,000 documents on a half a screen width. So it's a very compact representation. So on my regular computer screen, not a big monitor, but yeah, a big MacBook. But you can see every single document, and you can. The idea is that they represent small papers, and that you can hover over any single rectangle to get the to open up the actual metadata. So do you get the idea here?
I get the idea, but
Yes.
Interacting with it in such a small size would prove to be a little difficult.
I don't.
Perhaps, but
I don't think so.
Perhaps, but I don't personally. I don't have a problem at all interacting with, because it's a kind of of course, with a finger, if you do it on iPad, you need a bigger target, and I imagine this to be, yeah, you set the size you want it. Do you want to see much, or do you want to have it easily interactable? And if you grow it enough, I think you should see the actual papers. So, but when it's very small, I think the rectangles represent. But because on the other timeline, the actual text is not very useful. It just provides some flavor, because it's not really readable. It's small, but it provides some sort of visual irregularity. So it provides some flavor. But and my idea here is that you mark the rectangles, take different colors to provide a pattern that you can recognize. So
Yeah.
and the different colors represent different things. Maybe your favorites. Some represent the papers you have on your computer. Some people, some maybe kind of the ghosting, where you see previously clicked papers, which one you looked at, and so on. So it forms some sort of crazy mosaic, but that makes it recognizable.
I slightly think there's an interesting point that, in one sense, this is not the representation of the documents, because they are just boxes, but it certainly does hold the potential for representation of the documents. So I can imagine a couple of things. First of all, whatever you click on, if you use the arrow keys to go left, right, you can do that. And I guess we can have some lensing, so the one you're on goes a bit bigger, plus you see the name of it or something like that.
Yeah, I imagine kind of the same thumbnail or the hover boxes, because the idea here is when you hover or maybe click on an iPad or something, it opens up a small preview, and if you want to see that preview, it flies to the right and becomes a full document.
We now invite passengers. Please, so 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Sorry, it's a bit loud here. I'll mute as much as I can. Yeah, I mean, okay, can you just for a second, just click on the link I put in here, because this is the opposite, in the sense that it's really simple. I put a link in our chat.
You see?
Looks good.
So it's super simple, but I think it's very relevant, because so this is the library. It does actually exist now in a very crude manner, but so the first one, it is sorted by title, right? So that's easy. But the cool thing is, if there are any concepts that has that as attached to it, that's on the left. But as you can see, there can be more than one, right? So what happens then if you choose to sort by concept? Then if you look at the image below, or the last image, we have to decide how we're going to choose to show the images compared to how we're going to choose to show the concepts, right? Do you see my predicament?
We also like to remind you that passengers seated from row 15 and back, 15 and back.
Okay.
Because you're getting the concepts from within the content of the files, right?
No, it's not. And this is a really important point. For God's sake. Hang on. No, I'll have to cancel that call. Right. Anyway, but yeah, so many things going on. Yeah, so what I'm trying to say is, in either author or reader, you can select the word SRI or whatever, do Command D, and then you define what it is. At the bottom of that dialog, you can click plus to add a citation, a source or a reference for that. So that, let's say Doug Engelbart is a concept, so you add lots of Doug Engelbart things below there, right? So you have the map and all of that. The point of adding it in here is that not only should you be able to go through your references for PDFs, but you should also organize your concepts in the same interface. That's what the bottom two do. But I think that it's interesting, the problem of how to do the sorting then, because some documents will have more than one concept, but also chances are that the concepts will have more than one document. Does that make sense? So I'm wondering if we have because you also talked about maybe tagging and so on, Adam. Concepts are almost tagging, not quite, but almost. So I'm wondering in the interface you showed us, how we can do different sortings like that. Over.
In the bottom one, it's quite the saying Doug Engelbart 4 times is kind of a unnecessary, or I think it's kind of. I wonder if there is another way of showing it. Showing it 4 times may not be.
No, exactly, but that's why the one above, it shows it once, but then where it's titled, it's no longer one document on that row, it's 3 documents.
I would like to remind you that if you see it from row.
So the point is that you're sorting in this dimension, and rows and columns. But
Yep.
when you toggle one, actually you toggle a whole, it's almost like a Ted Nelson structure, you're toggling the whole thing. Right, are you?
Yep. So what about the old iTunes interface instead? Because when I researched these Miller columns, it reminded me of somewhere someone mentioned the old iTunes interface where you had like 4 different columns where you could refine by different criteria, paper or a genre or a music artist. You refine down your search until you had a few documents. And do you remember that interface? It was kind of maybe late 2000s or so.
Well, yeah, I remember it personally a little bit, but all I'm trying to say is, I think what you have is a very useful grid. So I'm really not trying to change the topic into this other sorting. It's just that the sorting problem became interesting. So I'm just wondering, as your interface looks like right now, it is of course completely useless, and you know that. It is about the interaction. So the question is, how do you move about, which is we discussed, but also, as you said, how do you show the different characteristics? We could have it in a way we just have lots of tabs on top or whatever, such as show only multiple cited, show only by this author, all of that stuff. And I'm also wondering if someone has tags or if someone has concepts, can we, because right now you're using 2 dimensions, which is fantastic. How do we want to put these other dimensions? What are your current thoughts on that, guys?
One thought is that I still really like if the number of documents are in the, let's say, 1,000 documents or so, like I have here, then I really like the idea of having them in place and highlighting them instead of filtering. I think the filter view is useful, of course, as well as a list view where you search and it's immediately folded down or filtered. That is, but if you want something graphical and kind of the overview, I think the highlighting of things is very useful. So imagine that we have a kind of a legend, like in a diagram on the side, where you, I guess the number of concepts are quite numerous. If you have 1,000 papers, I guess there would be. Hello, are you're still there, everyone? Yep.
Yeah.
I just had to check that I was at the right place.
Good. So I imagine that you maybe have 100 concepts for 1,000 papers, just to take a number. Let's say we have 100 concepts that we bothered to define that we think are useful. Of course, with tags, you could have 2,000 tags for 1,000 documents or even more. But with key concepts, you have 100 that you care about. So a legend with 100 concepts is, of course, too much. It will be a long list on the side with the. So we may need something similar to what Peter talked about a while ago, a kind of how you enter tags, but some sort of navigation that expands automatically for further refinement. So you maybe if you hover on something that is hypertext, or the people related to hypertext come up, and maybe Doug and Ted come up, and you click one of the name and then you filter. So you have some sort of broader kind of menu items or menu folders that so you can compact those 100 concepts into something more manageable.
I think one of your interface contributions that's really powerful is tab to change the entire view. I can imagine this exact design taking over the whole screen, full screen mode, and you tab, and it solves half of our problem. So that the user, with a little bit of training, will know that I'm now actually in concept view. That's all I'm seeing. If I click on a concept, I see everything connected. Or I'm in tag, or I'm in author name view. Maybe I'm only interested in whatever it might be. Tab through them. If you go too far, who cares? Just tab around. Right? I'm not saying we should necessarily only use tabs, but I'm saying that it would be amazing if we can make an interface that looks beautiful, but for someone who doesn't know what it is as messy as watching Minority Reports. And then they watch a 5-minute training video where they're introduced to a few of the keyboard shortcuts, like, holy moly. With this, I can change the view, but it's the same stuff.
Yeah, that is kind of the unicorn UI dream here, to have something that looks good by default, and it's not too cluttered by default, but everything is in a short reach. For the timeline, the vertical timeline, I imagine that you at least have keyboard shortcuts, so you can toggle files, toggle all the highlights, so you can see files you own, files by the same author as the document you have open, or and such interactions where you really can color this map immediately or turn it off on as you like. I wonder if there is something a bit more modal in a way, where you get that very advanced selection view, or a slightly overlaid of this. I'm not really sure if it's that you're talking about. You're talking about completely different views or ways of interacting, I guess. But
Yes.
But then we have the halfway point where you need to kind of filter a long list or big, 1,000 documents down to a handful relevant documents, and and the number of ways to filter are so numerous, or so that would take up a half of a screen or a full screen in itself. So maybe you can get a quick like overlay where you select things and then it disappears, kind of the power user filter view.
Yeah, I mean,
Immediately.
what I'm thinking about is, first of all, I think we need to start answering the questions that, sorry, my wife is texting me. She knows I'm in a meeting with you guys. It's so disruptive. Fuck's sake. All right, okay. We need to start asking questions about what the user should do, normal user scenarios. We have to do that because we're kind of falling into the default of finding a document. But what we're trying to do is we have to write down finding a document based on what criteria, right? Just intuition or keyword search, date search, all of that, of course. The other one is, oh my God, I have to cite something. How do I find a document that I already know? And then another one, I guess, is relationships. I know it's all obvious, but I think we should probably start blogging these things and then building the views, because what was so great about what you did with the timeline, you took my old 2016 design and just implemented it for fun, and then you did a completely different one. But the tab magically goes between them. So I could so easily imagine a view that looks almost exactly like what you emailed. You click around and do the things we talked, but then you hit tab and suddenly it's completely different. It's by author name. But there's so many things we can do, but I think that if we use this tab magic, we can experiment with a few, and if we don't like them, we just remove them from the normal tabbing. You could even have a kind of a hypertext view. Peter, what word am I looking for? You know, the layout stuff. What's the word?
Spatial hypertext?
Thank you. Thank you. You know, so there could be even user views where if you, let's say, shift click on something and then tab, what you do is copy that over into a completely new space. So you can, you know, move stuff around. So maybe there is a PDF, maybe it's the name of an author. So that becomes your put together space.
Another thing I'd like to do would be to select a couple exemplars and then let the system automatically do a contextual search for things that are close to them in the n-dimensional space, representing all of the attributes that we have associated with everything in the database. So that's a sort of like a visual version of the old Waze information system. If you remember that way back into the ancient proto days of the internet.
Can you elaborate, Peter?
The Waze servers would give you a bunch of documents, then you'd indicate which ones you liked best, and then it would use that as a generative filter to come up with the next iteration. And after a few cycles through that, presumably you'd find what you were looking for. Anything as wide area information servers for the expansion of the acronym. It's like came out as a successor to Gopher, and then it all got abandoned when the web arrived.
Okay, so let's consider, let's say that we are going to try to do something together that is so cool that Adam can't help but make it happen, and we want to show it in December. What are the key interactions that are both most impressive and most useful, do you think, guys?
One interaction is just time to document, to say a number of seconds to finding a document. I think that is kind of, you know what you want, and instead of looking through websites or folders for that document, it's a kind of quickness to documents. That is usually a bit impressive, but and most people get that because it's kind of symbolic and a representation of many information problems that you know where it is, but it takes a long time to get there. But in itself, it's just quicker. It's not it's just quicker. But I still think that is interesting.
I completely.
I'd love to see a command line at the bottom of the screen, so you could just type in, the 68 paper or whatever, and automatically have the system go to that location instead of having to navigate through when it's a well-known concept or a well-known paper. So you could just do a little typing and then have it automatically key into that.
Yeah, and that is something I think more and more people could benefit from, to actually have a textual interface, but that is combined with the graphical environment. It has started to show up in programmer tools that you have command palettes that are textual interfaces. But I think for regular people, a lot more people could benefit from having simple commands with some sort of guidance to make it discoverable, to actually search for things. But because some things like time and so on, it's so much easier to just write the year than actually browse to it. For other things, it's much easier to browse to it and point to it. So we need both, and they can be combined, I think.
Yeah, keeping them in sync is very important.
Yes.
I've been working on our timeline book today, and folding to get just the years is kind of useful as another interaction. But are we still considering having this as a library for one set of proceedings, or are we talking about any documents coming in for a personal library? Because those are very different use cases, of course.
I think you should be able to move your personal library into it over time. So
yes, and that is
text core and then add on.
That is certainly my goal for this. I imagine as a use case that you could add your PDF documents or maybe a few images as well. The future of textbook as an example, together with the ACM proceedings. I think that is kind of a good selection of things that are a bit similar and a bit different, that provides a good.
So of course, author exports with Visual Meta 1.1 now, and I'm sure there will be further things. And I had a discussion with Jacob yesterday about dates, and I said that what I think we need to do is actually put, even if we don't show it, we have the date down to the second, not just the year. Because I think that we can start in this kind of environment, use citations between documents in a faster manner. So it could even be used within our group, for instance. And then a very important issue becomes showing your own papers in a special way. Because I know some academics, they use their own papers as where they find the references for their next papers, because they know they're interested in those references, for instance. So kind of marking yourself and being able to have, within the year group, maybe you can click on a year and somehow squeeze it out. So then within that, you can also see that another timeline becomes much more granular. That kind of craziness.
Yeah.
Also, I want to capture the trails. So if one book leads me to another book, I want to be able to record in my bibliography tool that this is the book that led me to the next source. So I can capture over time how I wound my way through the literature.
Yeah, as a citation, so-and-so as seen in so-and-so, right?
Yeah, sort of a hat tip kind of a thing. Instead of just giving the citation, give the citation hat tip to what led you to the citation. And that sort of second order credit, I think, would be very useful. Because let's say there's some papers that we're not citing because there's nothing in them that's necessarily citable, but there are go-to gold mine for where we want to look to find the things that we're going to wind up citing for the next thing we're writing. And those papers aren't really getting enough credit for the service that they're doing to the literature in the literature. So I guess that sort of gets into alternate metrics for academic citations, and that's a whole open can of worms. There's a scholarly publishing group out there, Scholarly Kitchen or something. I'm blanking on the exact title, that talks about those kinds of issues. So it's a theme. They call their guest bloggers chefs, and I'm blanking on what the exact citation source is for that, but
So are we also interested then in integrating notes into this library? I think we
What was
should.
that, Fred? I couldn't hear you.
Are we only concerned with references in this library, or are we also concerned with using it as a place to store our own notes? I think that's kind of another holy grail, and that's what I'm using concepts for and what I'm testing. So I think, toggling through these different views, only see citations, only see notes, etc. What is your perspective on that, guys?
For personal notes, I think it's a different experience than collaborative notes. So whenever I'm working on like mostly personal notes, I tend not to think about too much on how the notes are structured or how it's organized or how it's written. But then if it's a collaborative environment, there's more care on how I'm going to prepare something so that it's useful for somebody else. So I would consider.
I'm thinking about notes for this kind of academic environment, because at one point, obviously we're all thinking about postgraduate students here because you're doing one paper, but undergraduates will have probably different libraries for different subjects, and they might even change from year to year. So we'll have to.
Found it and put in chat.
Yeah, cool. So I'm just saying, if we can find a way where we can write what we currently call notes, I'm sure we'll think of a thought for this academic thing. If we can integrate it into the same environment, it may be very, very powerful, because if you have that separate, it tends to get separated. What I mean is, why do you have notes? You have notes for what you're going to write. Why do you have a library? It's a library for what you're going to cite. Also other reasons, but these are two of the prime reasons, right? So both of them are, I have a thing I'm writing. I need notes and citations to put in here.
Yeah, I'd like it to be able to serve as a replacement for Devon Think.
And yeah, me as well. Well, not for Devon Think, I don't use it, but having some sort of personal note-taking system as a first thing, I think that would be very useful, because even though you, Frode, says that reading and writing are two very different activities, to me, I usually write when I read, if it's kind of a non-fiction thing. I write when I read, and I read when I write as well. So it's, to me, it's quite integrated. I do both. Of course, you always do one thing, a lot more of one thing, but I really want a scratch pad all the time, and when I'm reading some sort of margin notes. So I think commenting on documents and commenting on mostly any resource is very very important, and I think it should be considered from the start, because any system that has no note will like notes at some point anyway. I think personal notes.
I think we're on the same page. Reading and writing is completely different, but twin. You don't do one and then the other. Very often you do both. And I think the notion of annotation needs to be rethought. I think we all have discussed this, where you come across a bit in a book and you get inspired for something. That's all well and fine, but where should you write that so that in the future it is truly accessible? That's the issue, right? So should you maybe write it as a separate note that happens to be linked to that section in that document? Or should it be in that document? I find these issues to go a bit in a circle.
Yeah, it is a problem. It is a challenge, because sometimes you want the note attached, but for many of my documents, if I do too much graffiti in a document or in a digital document, I can't send it to someone else. And sometimes I even get irritated on myself, my 10-year-old younger self, that I have made irrelevant notes on a document that are no longer valid. I have new viewpoints and so on. So I think notes should be, there should be some sort of temporal sorting as well, that you have different readings for different years, so that the notes, I think they should be half separated, but or at least that you keep a pristine copy somewhere in the attic. In the digital attic, you have a copy of the original document untouched, because we can do that. Even a big PDF library won't take more than a few, maybe terabytes at most. So it's not.
So the reason I'm all over this concept thing is purely, they are tags, except they're tags that you have defined so that they can't just disappear somewhere. But I'm sure at some point we may have concepts or overarching concepts, some kind of way to organize that as well. Because, you know, I think we should kind of share a dream that at some point you should be able to just write a paragraph or two of referring to your concept, but the reader can instantly unpack that and they have your entire world at their disposal, right?
Yeah, I think one of the very core concepts, and I know that you and me, Frode, are on the same page here, is that the data, there is a big risk that you put all your that kind of information or the connecting glue into a database somewhere. Even if it's a good software or a medium, nice people doing the software, it's still in the database, so you can't really access them. So I really think that that having documents, kind of visual meta documents, maybe with just the links as separate documents, we're documenting everything that you can, so you can actually retrieve the information in the future yourself, manually as a worst case thing, but usually you can find a new tool that imports it. So I really want all the connections in an open format, so we don't get stuck in a new Evernote or Devonthink where the database is somewhat inaccessible. It's kind of it's a preservation thing, and especially for things that are so important, your whole external brain, your digital library, it has to be treated with great respect. So the thing of having a database in the documents is really important.
Yeah, let's have a slogan. Data should not be in databases. Databases should be indexed. Of course, they could always have a local copy, but we shouldn't rely on them. Yeah, of course.
No, the canonical copy should be the documents that contains the metadata and so on.
My biggest fear is that one day Apple's going to roll out a mandatory OS upgrade that's going to make some of my key apps permanently die, and I'm going to wind up losing all that content. And it just terrifies me. I want to be cross-platform. Yeah. I mean, I love the Apple environment. It's a nice piece of hardware. Their hardware people did a great job. I love my touch bar. There's a lot I can do with that. But I'm terrified how they keep trying to turn their machine into a Roach Motel for my data.
Yeah, same thing for me. I totally agree with you, Peter. And I haven't said it, but I really agree. And so even if you love something, it should be owned. The data should be owned by you and no one else. And it should be open. So of course you can have different specialized tools at different points that are more closed, but in general, the actual documents and data and material should be yours.
Wasn't it Sting who sung a song saying, if you love someone, set them free?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the one thing that makes Tinderbox an acceptable tool, because its native file format is just XML. So I know that even if Tinderbox were to go away, I don't lose any of that data. As long as I understand the schema that it was written to the file, I can go in, I can write my own library that can open up a Tinderbox file, manipulate it, know that Tinderbox will be able to understand the manipulations that I made. The only frustrating thing is that currently Tinderbox won't pick up live changes to an open file. I've been asking Mark to add that functionality, but again, it's the sort of thing that a geeky user like me who would be interested in creating external tools to interact with a live Tinderbox file would be interested in. So as far as his overall user base goes, you might have one, maybe two other people out there. Mark Anderson would probably find that useful. I'm not sure about anybody else. But
no, but even if your power uses you and Mark, Peter, I think there are a greater set of users that have an office wizard or a family member or someone else that helps with exactly that kind of conversion and automatic help them with that. And I think we should empower more users to at least use automatic tools for exactly what you're describing.
So in an environment like that, considering we expect the PDF documents to actually be in the library, not just referenced, although they probably could, maybe we should do the notes or concepts be saved as plain text files, one for each concept, one for each note, in a folder to follow exactly the kind of philosophy we're talking about, right?
Yes, I think that is a very good idea, and that is maybe the only reason why I'm skeptical to putting everything into the end of the PDF, because PDF is quite clunky to get it out there without irreversible damage. But having a simple text file as a glue it has stood the test of time, just as PDF has now for maybe 15-20 years or a bit more. Text has stood the test of time for 40-50 years maybe.
They do different jobs, so we should use them for their different benefits. Exactly. Peter.
Also, that would open up the possibility of adding visual meta to a PDF that we don't control. So
or image
for the visual meta, that'd be real important. And also, I'd strongly recommend having Author or any tool that we create set up a little background file watcher to see if the data file that it loaded was modified by some other application, then automatically try to reconcile the two versions, or at least tell you that the file as on disk has now been updated by some other process. Do you want to try to merge the changes? Do you want to fork that and create a separate sub file? Maybe it's just like push it off and give you a side-by-side view of here's what the new live version is out on the disk. Here's the version in RAM that you've been working on. So you could cherry pick between the two and merge them by hand, or just simply choose to pick one of the two versions as being canonical, or if there are no conflicts between the two, auto merge them together. And that really just sort of like encourages people to jump into our ecosystem if they know that you can write something that just does some little trivial tweak. Maybe all you care about is, normalizing the capitalization of Icelandic names or something. You could write a little thing that will go through, spot those even just with a simple regular expression search and replace app to go modify the file, and then know that anything else in the ecosystem is going to be picking that up.
I don't know if this is a stupid question, but is there a place like, for example, for the web, we have the W3C, right? Do we have something for that for the combination of text, search, and glossary and things like that? Or basically how we deal with text and the many possibilities, like the standardization of different, we have, the Chicago Manual of Style, but that's for printing. Do we have something, for the web?
We're at the bleeding edge.
Future of text.
No, perhaps some librarians have similar processes for more archival type of text formats. Just as they standardize on different image formats and video formats, just for long-term archiving. But that is slightly different.
The American Library Association, because it's one of the oldest ones.
So, while Rafael is looking for that, the previous question about, so obviously we store a PDF as a PDF, but if it's a book, maybe we should store that not as visual meta PDF, but as a plain text file, where you have some stuff on top, but you also have the actual Visual Meta BibTeX for that book, but it is stored as a text file. If we do that and make a standard for that,
is that a physical book or digital book in some way?
a book that isn't there. So it doesn't matter if it's physical or, but yeah,
Yep.
it's just a reference, the same as a web page. So for instance, if we have a nice plugin, then of course the whole web page can be stored in this, or at least the text. But if we do it this way, that means that to go between my library and Adam's library is just a matter of copying files across. And then we get into a very, very interesting other thing, and that is active to-do items. Because a note that you share with someone else or a note you share with yourself in the future may actually be a to-do item, right? An action item. So imagine if in the middle of doing this collaborative work, we're working on a document, we have this magic library, and we have a little thing that I write down just randomly. I'm the one who writes it, but somehow I tag the three of you to also work on this. So you get it in your library, still just a text file, but as an action thing. And if you do an action, like Raphael says done, I am alerted that he says it is done. You know, there are many workflows, and this has been done since forever. But if we do it in a really super simple, super open way, then it becomes extensible and we own that data, right? We could even use WebDAV or iCal standard or whatever to distribute these items, even though we send them as that kind of data. Over.
Yeah, and that system is very similar to the kind of notification and subscription system that we've discussed before for actual documents. So it's it's very similar in spirit, even though it's a to-do item or something similar. You subscribe to. I subscribe to action points made by you concerning me, but I can also subscribe to your published documents, either all of them or on a certain topic. So it's similar in spirit, and I think the underlying infrastructure is the same to get to actually transport, be notified and transport those very plain text or those documents back and forth. And they don't live in a database, they live in a document and are indexed by your local indexing software, and maybe a web-based one as well, but it's not the canonical source, the document is.
Oh, in case you haven't seen it yet, there's a company called Neo4j that makes a graph database product, and they have a website and they have a bunch of free books on knowledge graphs. So you can find that, basically just give the contact information and they'll send you a link and let you download the PDFs of the books. And you might get some really good ideas there. Really interesting reading. So if you just Google for Neo4j, you should be able to stumble onto that with minimal effort. I don't have a link handy, unfortunately.
I think I've seen them. I think I even downloaded something. Yeah, I haven't read it. So in which order, and especially for the December demo meeting, and also for our own personal preferences, so in which order, what is mostly
Well, the latest,
Yep.
I'd recommend starting with the latest one they just came out with, and the title, I'll have it for a second.
I'm Peter, I'm talking about our project here. In which order? Yeah,
I thought you were asking what order to read on their website.
Yeah, okay. I quickly changed the topic back. Or, in which order do you want things here? Personally, what is really either the number one pain point or the thing that you think is most important for this or us?
From my perspective, attributes of this is really what's important. I think one attribute is it has to be extremely actually open, not just saying it. So maybe using those text files or whatever. That in itself, I think, is crucial. Second one is, I go back to your tab thing. If we build a few things, and even if only one of them is actually useful, the other ones are just silly, just to show that it's based on this extremely open data anybody can take anywhere. And look, we built these views. We can actually experiment without being locked into a system. So I don't actually care what we build specifically, but I'd love to be part of the dialogue of designing things within that. What do the rest of you think?
Yeah, it matches my personal views, yeah, almost perfectly. And I think what Peter said before about having being able to write plugins yourself to have a end user programmable thing, whenever you feel that something is missing, that you can actually interact with the data and you make a new view, or if you have the skills or someone with the skills, it's very, very liberating.
That's one of the things that's happened a lot in the Tinderbox community. Because Tinderbox basically has a programming language built into it, you're able as an end user to prototype some bit of functionality that you'd like. You can start off with your own user attribute, work out some agents to implement how that user attribute would behave. And if people find it useful enough, Mark will turn that user attribute that you created into a system attribute inside of the app itself, take those agents you created and turn them into compiled functionality inside the app. So you're able to move from someone going off and creating the prototype demo that everyone can see, comment on, and have real rapid iteration of playing with it when it exists at the end user scripting level inside the app before it turns into a core feature of the app down the road. So you have this very nice smooth path between what's somebody's outside hack versus something that becomes the next generation of the core program. Also, I posted in the chat an idea for a file extension. How about .evm for externalized visual meta? So that if we are going to have visual meta that isn't directly in the PDF, or we have a copyrighted PDF that we can't tack something onto in terms of extra pages, if you had the same file name, just that the extension, instead of being .pdf, was .evm, our system could find it, know to look for those companion files, and then pull them in.
That's definitely interesting.
It's like those EXIF files that you can have for images.
Exactly.
So in terms of what to build, Rafael and Peter, what do you think we should build? And what problem are we really solving?
For me personally, I think it has a lot to do with filtering and finding. Like I think Adam mentioned in the beginning, how fast can you find what you're looking for? So my two main ideas would be related to making things easier to find and finding things faster.
My other big pain point would be the collaboration angle, which again is a spot where Tinderbox sort of falls flat on its face. You want to have the ability to publish and subscribe to feed from someone else's system so that I can say that, anything that Rafael does that he's making public, I want to be able to automatically import and keep synced and up to date inside of my local database. And I want to be able to explicitly push something out to Adam that he might not know about that will appear in his inbox sort of as a to-do item kind of a thing. Only instead of it just being a to-do, it would be the actual data item that I want him to take a look at, and that would move into his collection. So we could move stuff between our collections as easily as drag and drop. That means that in addition to representing sources, I also want to be able to have little representations of colleagues. So instead of the little document rectangle, it could be a little person's head and torso silhouette, and I could drag a source onto that silhouette, and that would cause that reference to be pushed out to that person and vice versa. Or if I double clicked on your silhouette code, that could open a little folder view of what things you're offering for subscription to, and then I could drag a couple of them off into my database, and that would create the live link.
I love
And
the
whatever
collaboration
mechanism
aspect,
provides
but
the
I think collaboration implementation is a big undertaking for what we have or what we're going to be able to do.
I agree, but I just wanted to mention, Peter, the last bit you talked about. I had this thing many, many years ago, this idea where you put almost like little Lego figures on your desktop, and they are the people you're working with. So if someone has a message for you, they're holding up something. If there's a note about that person, it's a sticky, so use all 4 parts. And if you want to send something, you just drag it onto that person.
Yes.
So you could then also see, maybe if they publish something, a major work in an actual journal, they could hold it up and shake and be very excited. Anyway, so many fun things we can do. Adam, what you have sent today in email, how far along is that? Does it function?
That is, it's a live data thing, but you can't actually do anything in it. You can just see it right now. So I need at least to transfer the functionality of the other timelines in there, so you can see the abstract references on the side. So it's actually useful. First, you see the tooltips. If you happen to like anything, you click on it and it appears in a more expanded full form on the side. And the blue documents, I want to show them inline as well, to just as the future of text prototype I did and show you, sent you an email about. I want to show the actual PDF. If it's on the hard drive or the web server, but it's more tricky when it's published information. Then I want it to appear directly inline in the view on the side. So that could be a day's work maybe to do that for me.
I think it'd be really important for us to be able to save the current version of a web resource. I've been so frustrated going back to old URLs and finding that what it had when I remember saving the bookmark is no longer what's there. And lo and behold, I go into the Internet Archive and it was never saved by anyone in the past, and it's gone forever. And I know that it said such and such a thing roughly a year ago when I'd last looked at it, and I have no way to prove that. Therefore, I can't properly cite it. Other than saying URL had something that I seem to remember, but I can't prove it because I didn't print it all out. Because God forbid I print out every web page I visit. I'd need, Warehouse 13 at my disposal just for the paper.
What I did for a long time was that I created on the Mac, I created special paper types that were kind of infinite scrolls, like an A4, but very, 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 very tall. So whenever I printed, I selected that as my PDF target.
I do that as well, Adam.
I get very, very long. So actually, it's I have them saved as very, very long scrolls. My special Adam paper type that is very, very long, and instead of picking A4 as the target. Nowadays, Safari and Mac does that automatically. You can save as PDF, and it automatically creates a very long PDF scroll of it when you save as PDF. But for a while, I had a few 5 different very long scrolls that I selected the closest one and saved it. But of course, the actual PDF readers are not always happy with those infinite scroll things. But
also, it doesn't look like the actual web page anymore because you're getting the styles that were applied for print, styles for screen.
Yeah.
It really was like save as PDF, but lie to the system and tell it to render it as a screen render, and then save it as a PDF after. So that's why I wind up using the web archive format, and that gets a little bit dicey.
So now we're getting more tricky if we stay with plain text.
You mentioned that on Safari you can make it fill automatically. How do you do that? Because I'm not sure I know yet.
If you in Safari, in the file menu, you have a save as PDF, and it actually creates a very long PDF.
export as PDF.
Export as PDF, and it will become a PDF. And on iPad, and if you do a screenshot and select
Yes.
that actually becomes a PDF. So these are the two
Got it.
versions, and both of them are very long PDFs. So
Or
I use
print and
PDFs.
save. Yeah, also
trouble
print and
is-
save.
No, it's export. Say yeah.
Right, it's export. I haven't used the export one. I just use it right now, and it
On the
works.
desktop, it's
very good.
exported. So it's very useful. I usually surf in other browsers, but I go to Safari and paste it in and just save my copy there. So it's my archiver.
Now, the question is, will that save scripts that are on the page? And will it save the current version of data that's imported by the scripts in order to render the content on the page?
It's quite it's quite similar to the rendered version, but it doesn't save anything more advanced. So it's a kind of a print, half of a print version. It's slightly more. It looks like the page, so it doesn't respect all the print styling. But this is kind of tangential.
I have to go, guys.
Yep.
The airplane.
Have a good flight.
Okay, good session.
Just while we kind of wrap up, it's not really tangential this, because if we're going to have this kind of stuff saved as plain text, we can't have this. If we save it as PDF, we can. So clearly, we probably want to do a balance in the right way, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Also, one thing, I've been in email contact with Ted Nelson this week, and he's in his normal mood, let's say, which is fine. But I do think that he has a lot more to teach us. Again, I know you all have studied him, and I think it's time to really think again, because what he really gives us is abstraction, like zigzag, and all of this stuff. It's not really following convention. He's allowing the user to build spaces in their brain, and I think that's what you're really pushing here, Adam. So it may be fun to just go back and look at some of that.
Arithmetic, all sorts of good stuff.
Yep.
I love the parallel documents with the lines connecting corresponding chunks of them.
Yeah, and I think if we go that parallel route ourselves with the kind of nested columns idea, we have a good foundation for actually doing the actual connections between the documents. But at least they are side by side. Then, if you have a PDF, click on a reference, that reference opens up to the right, and so on to the right, to the right, to the right in a nested version. Then you have very parallel documents. Then you could add those actually bridge lines as well if you want to see the actual source location.
Absolutely, and then we should be able to zoom out and have overlaid top and bottom if we're opening more than one from one document.
Yep.
But just to bring TikTok back into this conversation again today, I've tested 2 filters, one that makes people smile and one that makes them pout. You can even point the camera at a drawing or a model, and it works. And somebody did it on the underground with people going up on the escalator towards them, and everybody starts smiling. So freaky. If they can do that kind of powerful stuff, we should be able to throw this in as many dimensions as we want. We should be able to do such visualizations. Anyway, people are doing walking. I need to go to my seat.
Yep.
Thanks, guys. Have a wonderful weekend, and I look
You
forward
too.
to Monday.
Yep, see you next
Safe
week.
flight.
Thank you. Bye.
I can't be there on
Safe flight.
Monday, but we will stay in touch on email, and I'll see you on Friday. Next Friday.
Adam,
Yeah.
get the link on the chat, or I'll send it by email. But it's a nice reference for vertical scrolling as well. For horizontal
Yep.
scrolling, I mean.
Yep. Cool. I will check that out.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
clicked on that link too. Okay, see
Have
you
a nice
later, guys.
weekend, guys. Bye bye.
You too. Bye.